In 1946, Transjordan gained independence from the British Mandate of Palestine. A year later, the United Nations adopted a partition plan for a two-state solution in the remaining territories of the Mandate. The plan was accepted by the Jewish leadership, but rejected by the Arab leaders, and the British refused to implement the plan. On the final leg of the British withdrawal, the Jewish Agency for Israel declared the establishment of the State of Israel in accordance with the proposed UN plan. The Arab High Committee did not declare the situation on its own and instead, along with Transjordan, Egypt, and other members of the then Arab League, began the 1948 Arab-Israel War. During the war, Israel gained additional territory that was expected to become part of an Arab state under the UN plan. Egypt gained control of the Gaza Strip and Transjordan gained control of the West Bank. Egypt initially supported the creation of the Al-Palestine government, but it was dissolved in 1959. Transjordan once recognized him and instead decided to incorporate the West Bank with its own territory to form Jordan. The annexation was ratified in 1950. The Six-Day War of 1967, when Egypt, Jordan, and Syria fought against Israel, ended in significant territorial expansion by Israel. This expansion involved the entire West Bank, which remained under Israel occupation, and the Gaza Strip, which was occupied until Israel's withdrawal in 2000. The question of whether the Gaza Strip remains under occupation after the withdrawal is a subject of debate, but a senior Hamas official called the occupation of the Gaza Strip a thing of the past. In 1964, when the West Bank was controlled by Jordan, the Palestine Liberation Organization was founded there with the aim of converting Israel. The PLO Palestinian National Charter defines the boundaries of the Palestinian territories as the remainder of the entire mandate, including Israel. After the Six-Day War, the PLO moved to Jordan, but then moved to Lebanon after the Black September event of 1971. In 1974, the Arab League recognized the PLO as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people and obtained observer status at the UN General Assembly. After the 1982 Lebanon War, the PLO moved to Tunisia. In 1979, through the Camp David Agreement, Egypt signaled an end to its own recognition of the Gaza Strip. In July 1988, Jordan ceded its claim to the West Bank, with the exception of guardianship over the Haram al-Sharif to the PLO. In November 1988, the PLO, while in exile, declared the creation of a State of Palestine. In the following month, it was immediately recognized by many countries, including Egypt, Jordan, and Indonesia. In the Palestinian Declaration of Independence, the State of Palestine is described as being established on Palestinian territory, without specifying further. Because of this, some countries that recognize the State of Palestine in their statement of recognition refer to the 1967 border, thus recognizing as its territory only the occupied Palestinian territories and not Israel. During the Oslo Accord negotiation, the PLO recognized Israel's right to exist, and Israel recognized the PLO as the representative of the Palestinian people. Between 1993 and 1998, the PLO made a commitment to amend provisions of the Palestinian National Charter that were incompatible with the goals for a two-state solution. After Israel took control of the Palestinian territories from Jordan and Egypt, it began building Israel settlements there. It is organized into Judea and Samaria district or West Bank of Gaza Regional Council of Gaza Strip in the Southern District. The administration of the Arab population of the territory was carried out by the Israel Civil Administration, the coordinator of government activities in the region, and by the local city councils present before the Israel takeover. In 1980, Israel decided to freeze the election for the councils and formed the language of villages instead. Most officials were under Israel influence. Later, this model became effective for both Israel and Palestinians, and the village language began to break up. With the loss of the Bank, the Hebron language disbanded in February 1988. As described in the Oslo Accord, Israel was allowed by the PLO to establish temporary administrative institutions in the Palestinian territories, which appeared in the form of the PNA. It is granted civil and/or security control in some areas. In 2005, following the implementation of Israel's unilateral secession plan, the PNA took full control of the Gaza Strip with the exception of its border, air, and territorial water. After the inter-Palestinian conflict in 2006, Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip and Fatah controlled the West Bank and the entire PNA agency. And currently, the Gaza Strip is governed by Hamas and the West Bank by Fatah.